Okay, so welcome back to the deep dive. And today we're going back, to the heart of the X-Files.
Right.
One of those early episodes that really kind of set the stage for everything that was to come. And this one in particular was suggested by a lot of you.
Right, yeah.
And I think for good reason, right? I mean, it's E.B.E.
Yeah, E.B.E, a lot of people consider this kind of like a foundational
Absolutely.
in terms of, really getting into the alien mythology and establishing, some key
Right,
facts.
absolutely. And we have a ton of great material here from all of you about not just like the plot of E.B.E, but also sort of like, some of the behind the scenes stuff. And I'm really excited to dive into all of it. So
Yeah, let's do it.
I guess maybe like a good place to start is just sort of like, a brief kind of like, what is E.B.E about, for anyone who may have like, maybe hasn't seen it in a while or, whatever.
Right. Yeah, well, right off the bat, you get this like really dramatic opening scene. It's set in Iraq,
Right.
and there's this Iraqi fighter jet
Yeah.
that intercepts like a UFO
Right.
over Iraq, and then it crashes, across the border in Turkey, and it immediately pulls you into like this whole world of like international intrigue and mystery. You know what I mean?
Right. From the beginning, you get the sense that whatever this is, it's not just like an American thing.
Exactly.
It's like
It's global.
a global conspiracy.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I guess like, we shift then pretty quickly to the U.S., to Tennessee,
Right.
where we meet this truck driver, Ranheim, who has like a pretty intense encounter. I mean, he
Yeah.
sees something in the sky, fires a shotgun, and that's kind of like
And that's how
it kicks off.
that brings Mulder and Scully in.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, what's interesting is that right away you get that like classic X-Files dynamic,
Yeah.
with Mulder and Scully.
Yeah.
Scully, of course, she's the skeptic. She's looking for like the logical explanation. Right?
Yeah.
She's talking about swamp gas and hallucinations and stuff like that.
Well, she does have the, the line in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
That people always remember,
Yeah.
which is like, I'm not going to say it because, I don't want to, but,
Right.
it's the swamp gas line.
But it's funny because like, even though she's saying that,
Right.
she's still like kind of drawn in
Yeah.
because it's just like, weird stuff is happening. And of course, Mulder gets there and like right away, he's like, breaking out his equipment and detecting these like higher than normal radiation levels.
Right.
So you kind of get the feeling that like, okay, something's not quite right here,
Yeah. And Ranheim himself is, acting very strangely, and the authorities are like very quick to like, shut this case down, and it just feels like
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's like a little too convenient,
Yeah.
a little too quick to dismiss everything. And I think that's what really kind of sets Mulder off. You know what I mean? Like he's
totally
got that instinct that something's being covered up.
right. And then we meet the lone gunman
Oh, yeah.
in this episode.
Yeah.
Which is a really
That's a big
fun addition.
Wow.
I mean, how would you kind of characterize like, the lone gunman?
Oh, man. They're like these, they're almost like these like stereotypical conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
But also kind of endearing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're these guys who are just like so into like all these different conspiracies. They've got all this information.
Like an encyclopedia of like...
They're like walking encyclopedias of conspiracy theories. And
and they just immediately launch into this like
oh, yeah.
rapid fire.
They talk about everything like the Kennedy assassination
Yeah.
and the CIA and
Like the dollar bill.
Like I mean, it's just like this
So great.
deluge of information. And it's just like
Yeah.
establishes their characters right away.
Totally. Yeah.
It's like, they're not just like,
Right.
they're not like, mainstream thinkers or anything like that.
Right.
They're like deep down the rabbit hole,
Right. Yeah. And Scully even kind of like pokes fun at them a little bit, which is like...
Oh, yeah. She's definitely like a little bit
Yeah.
like taken aback by them,
Right.
I mean, who wouldn't be?
But then, in this seemingly like, innocent moment, Scully lends them her pen.
Right.
And, anyone who's seen the episode knows that
Oh, yeah. That comes back.
later on she discovers that it's bugged.
Right.
Which is just like this really chilling reminder that like,
Oh, yeah.
they're being watched.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like this really like creepy
Yeah.
moment, where you realize that like nobody's safe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like even just a simple act of like lending somebody a pen can have these like,
Yeah.
consequences, you know?
Right. And you know, and then we kind of get to the introduction.
Well, kind of the reintroduction, I guess you would say.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's kind of
The deep throat.
recurring character now.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is kind of like one of those early
Yeah, one of the early
moments with Deep Throat. And so Mulder goes to him, you know, for information.
Right.
And as always, Deep Throat's like, you know, playing this like very cagey game.
He's like the ultimate, you know, informant.
Right.
You know, like he gives you just enough
Yeah.
to keep you coming back, but never the whole picture.
Right. He's a man of few words, but every word
Oh, yeah.
is very
Carefully
chosen. Yeah. And so, you know, Deep Throat confirms that, you know, this transmission that the Iraqis intercepted was, you know, about this downed object. But he also like warns Mulder, you know, that he's getting into dangerous territory.
Right. He's like, you're going down a dangerous path.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, you know, is he trying to like help Mulder, or is he trying to like steer him away from something?
Yeah.
You know, it's really unclear what his motivations are.
And meanwhile, Scully is doing, you know, her own investigation.
She's doing the real legwork.
And she is uncovering some like real hard evidence.
Yeah, she finds these discrepancies with Ranheim's truck.
Yeah.
Like the weight of the truck doesn't match up. And then she discovers that like, you know, Ranheim is not who he says he is.
Right.
His real name is Frank Druce, and he's like ex-special ops. He served in Iraq.
Right. Okay.
And so it's like...
Yeah, it's not just some random...
Yeah, it's not just some, like, you know... coincidence. You know, this is like...
It's a plan.
This is like a planned operation.
Yeah.
You know?
And then Deep Throat kind of throws them a curveball.
Oh, yeah.
He gives Mulder this photograph of a UFO.
Supposedly a UFO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At Fort Benning. And it seems like a pretty...
It seems like a pretty obvious attempt to mislead.
Right.
You know, like, throw him off the trail.
Yeah, and Mulder for a second...
Mulder's like, believes it.
Yeah, he's like totally buys into it for a minute. And then Scully, of course, is the one who's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with this photo. This isn't real.
Right.
And so they confront Deep Throat about it. And he finally admits that, like, okay, yeah, I was trying to mislead you.
Right.
But he also confirms that the Iraqi transmission was real.
Right.
And he reveals what's in the truck.
Right. And E.B.E. Yeah, which is like a huge moment.
Oh, yeah. That's like
that's when
the whole crux of
the episode really becomes about like alien. Yeah. It's like no longer just about like, you know, unexplained phenomena.
Right. It's about like an actual alien being.
An actual alien being that's being transported, you know, across the country.
Right. And so then it becomes this like, you know, classic X-Files chase.
Right.
Mulder and Scully are on the run. They're trying to track down, you know, Druce and the E.B.E.
Yeah, they're following the truck.
Right.
Las Vegas.
Yeah, and along the way, there's like, you know, all this like strange weather and stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's like the, you know, the skies are going crazy.
Yeah.
You know.
But then when they finally catch up to the truck, it's empty.
Yeah.
Druce is gone. The E.B.E. is gone. And all that's left is like this like makeshift medical...
Yeah, like a little medical ward in the back of the truck.
Right. And so Mulder concludes that like, you know, this was all a setup.
Yeah.
Like to throw them off.
To make them think that they were close.
Yeah.
But they weren't.
But really, they were being manipulated the whole time.
Yeah. So Mulder, undeterred, decides to turn to like UFO hotlines.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like so funny to think about now.
It's like so old school, you know? But I guess that's what they had back then.
Right.
You know?
And he manages to track Druce and the E.B.E. to this power plant.
To a power plant in Mattawa, Washington.
Right. Yeah. And then, you know, the lone gunman come back into play.
Oh, yeah. Langley.
Yeah.
With his hacking skills.
Right.
You know, helps them get some fake IDs so they can try to infiltrate the power plant.
Right. And there's this great scene where they're like, you know, trying to get past the guards and it's all very like...
Oh, yeah. It's very tense.
Tense. And, you know, they almost pull it off.
Almost.
Yeah.
But they get caught.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Deep Throat shows up again.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like, in like the most unexpected way.
Yeah, like where did he...
Like he's just suddenly there.
Yeah.
Inside the facility.
Right.
Yeah.
And he dismisses the guards.
Yeah.
and he reveals that the E.B.E. is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes on to explain that, like, there's this, like, secret international agreement.
Yeah, like post-Roswell.
Right.
Yeah.
To, like, eliminate any living E.B.Es.
Right.
And he even admits to, like, carrying out one of these executions.
Oh, yeah, in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Which is like...
Yeah, which is, like, a very heavy moment.
It was, like, super heavy.
Yeah.
You really see, like, a different side of Deep Throat in that moment. Like, he's not just this, like,
right.
Kind of shadowy figure.
You're right.
Yeah, he's got this, like, whole backstory and this, like, trauma that he's carrying with him.
Right. And then, as Deep Throat's, like, leading them out, Mulder glances into this holding cell where the E.B.E. was supposedly kept.
Yeah.
And it's, like, empty.
Mm-hmm.
And you just see this look on his face, like
he's not buying it.
Yeah. And then Deep Throat just, like, lets them go. Yeah. And you're just left wondering, like...
Wait, like, what
was real? What was a lie?
Yeah. That's classic X-Files, though, isn't it?
Yoda.
Like, they give you just enough information to keep you guessing.
Yeah. It's such a great episode, and there's so much to unpack.
Oh, yeah.
Like, even beyond, just, like, the plot itself.
Yeah, like behind the scenes and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I guess, like, maybe we can shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
To talk about some of that stuff.
Yeah.
E.B.E. I mean, it really does feel like, a turning point in the X-Files.
It's kind of like a threshold,
Right.
Like they cross a line.
Yeah.
And they're not going back.
Yeah. It's like, before this episode, it was a lot of, like...
Monster of the Week.
Yeah. But then E.B.E. really, like, cements.
Yeah. Gets into, like, the real deep...
Right, the mythology, yeah. And even the title, like, E.B.E.
Yeah.
It's so, like...
It's mysterious.
Yeah.
Right? It's like these 3 letters.
Right.
That just represent, like, so much,
Right.
It's
like a code word.
It's like a code word, yeah.
Yeah.
For the unknown.
Yeah, and this is Deep Throat's last appearance.
Oh, yeah.
Which is kind of sad.
It is kind of sad.
Yeah.
It's like...
Like, Mulder loses his, like...
He loses his one connection to this, like... shadowy world.
Right. And, you can't really talk about this episode without talking about, like, the whole, like, UFO phenomenon. And,
right. Roswell and all that.
Roswell. Yeah. Like, this episode really, like, taps into
that whole cultural zeitgeist, like
all
those fears and anxieties about, government cover-ups and stuff like that.
And Mulder and Scully going rogue.
Oh, yeah.
That's like
that's a big moment, too.
Yeah. Like, they're basically saying,
we're not going to play by the rules anymore.
Right.
We're going to do things our own way.
Yeah. And we also get these, like, glimpses of the cigarette smoking man.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's not a major character.
Not yet.
Right.
But, he's kind of lurking in the background.
Right. And you get this feeling that, like, he's
pulling the strings.
Yeah, he's up to something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, the tension between Mulder and Scully is also, like,
oh, yeah,
really palpable in this episode.
Yeah, it's like, Mulder's belief is constantly being tested.
Right, yeah.
And Scully's, like, trying to hold on to her skepticism.
Yeah.
But it's getting harder and harder.
Right.
As they encounter more and more weird stuff.
Right, and Mulder really gets, like, his trust broken in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Big
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, he thinks he can trust Deep Throat, and then it turns out that, like...
Right.
Deep Throat's been lying to him.
Yeah.
And the episode really uses a lot of these classic, like...
UFO tropes?
Yeah. The military involvement, the captured alien, like, top secret research facility. All that stuff.
And it's like, it's all very familiar.
Yeah.
But it's also like...
But it still feels fresh.
Yeah.
It's like they took these, like, familiar elements.
Right.
And then they put their own spin on it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, there's some really interesting, like, behind the scenes stuff too that we can talk about.
Let's get into it.
So the inspiration for the Lone Gunmen actually came from...
Oh, yeah. This is a fun fact.
Yeah. A real life encounter that the creators had at a UFO convention.
Like back in 1993?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, like,
It's crazy to think about.
So wild.
Yeah.
And then the lab where the E.B.E. is being held is actually like a real research facility.
Oh, yeah. It's like a power plant.
Right.
Or something like that.
Yeah, and it's just like, this really interesting blend of fiction and reality.
It's like they took this real world location.
Right.
And then they turned it into this like,
Right.
sci-fi setting.
Yeah. And originally, the lone gunmen were only supposed to be in this one episode.
Yeah, that's right.
But they were so popular that they became like recurring characters.
They became like fan favorites.
Yeah. And they even got their own spin-off show.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And Tom Braidwood, who plays Frohike, was actually the first assistant director.
Oh, wow.
On the X-Files.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Which is like so funny to think about.
It's like he was just like,
right.
hanging around on set. And they were like, hey.
Yeah.
You want to be in the show.
Right.
Yeah.
And his name was even used as an in-joke.
Oh, yeah.
In some of the earlier episodes.
Yeah, that's right.
Because he was the assistant director.
Yeah, they would just like throw his name in there.
Right. Which is so great.
Yeah.
Glenn Morgan, who wrote this episode, has said that he was really inspired by all the President's Men.
Oh, yeah.
And you can definitely see that.
Yeah, you can feel that paranoia.
Right.
And like mistrust of authority.
Right. And Chris Carter has said that this is one of his favorite episodes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. He specifically mentioned the opening scene and the scene with Mulder and Deep Throat at the Shark Tank.
Oh.
Those are some of his
That Shark Tank scene is so iconic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And critically, this episode was really well received.
Oh, yeah.
Entertainment Weekly gave it an A.
An A? That's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they called it dense, dazzling, and dark.
Wow.
Zach Handlin from the AV Club had kind of a more nuanced take. He said it was occasionally clunky, but generally fun.
Yeah.
Which I think is fair.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Matt Hay from Den of Geek, he actually said that he thought E.B.E. could have been a season finale.
Oh, wow.
Which is
That's a big statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the story was even adapted into a young adult novel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So it's
That's cool.
it really had an impact.
Yeah. It obviously resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah, so I think, SAE is definitely a really important episode in the X-Files.
It's a classic
For
a reason.
It really sets up a lot of the...
Yeah, it lays the groundwork for everything that comes after.
Right.
Yeah,
and I would encourage anyone who's listening to go back and rewatch it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And, maybe think about, what are the modern day E.B.Es?
Ooh. That's a good question.
What are the secrets that are being kept from us?
Right.
Yeah,
what are the things that we're not supposed to know?
Right.
Yeah. It makes you think.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us for this deep dive into E.B.E.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.